Okay, now we're on YouTube. Okay, so this is the first Monday of the month, and has as is come our I probably haven't done it enough times to call it a tradition yet, but our habit, we're going to be sharing miscellaneous writings of many sorts with each other, and then talking about what we read. So for myself, I remembered that I had mentioned uh, Soren Kierkegaard, and specifically the book Either Or. And so I thought I would read the very beginning. Uh, I won't go on too long, uh, but this is Soren Kierkegaard. And as always, he has an epigram at the beginning. I'll read the English version. Greatness, knowledge, renowned, friendship, pleasure, and possessions. All is only wind, only smoke. To say it better, all is nothing. What is a poet? An unhappy person who conceals profound anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so formed that as sighs and cries pass over them, they sound like beautiful music. It is with him as with the poor wretches and Phalaris's bronze bull, who were slowly tortured over a slow fire. Their screams could not reach the tyrant's ears to terrify him. To him, they sounded like sweet music. And people crowd around the poet and say to him, "Sing again soon." In other words, may new sufferings torture your soul, and may your lips continue to be formed as before, because your screams would only alarm us. But the music is charming. And the reviewers step up and say, "That is right. So it must be according to the rules of aesthetics." Now, of course, a reviewer resembles a poet to a hare, except that he does not have the anguish in his heart or the music on his lips. Therefore, I would rather be a swineherd out on Amager and be misunderstood by swine than to be a poet and be misunderstood by people. It's common knowledge that the first question and the first and most compendious instruction given to a child is this: what does baby want? The answer is Dada. And with such observations, life begins. And yet we deny hereditary sin. And yet, whom does a child have to thank for his first thrashings? Whom else but his parents? I prefer to talk with children, for one may still dare to hope that they may become rational beings. But those who have become that, good Lord, how unreasonable people are. They never use the freedoms they have, but demand those they do not have. They have freedom of thought, they demand freedom of speech. I don't feel like doing anything. I don't feel like writing. The motion is too powerful. I don't feel like walking. It's too tiring. I don't feel like lying down, for either I would have to stay down, or I don't feel like doing that, or I would have to get up again, and I don't feel like doing that either. Summa summarum. I don't feel like doing anything. There are, as is known, insects that die in the moment of fertilization. So it is with all joy. Life's highest and most splendid moment of enjoyment is accompanied by death. And I better not stop on that note. Tested advice for authors. One carelessly, one carelessly writes down one's personal observations, has them printed, and in the various proofs, one will eventually acquire a number of good ideas. Therefore, take courage, you who have not yet dared to have something printed. Do not despise typographical errors. And to become witty by means of typographical errors may be considered a legitimate way to become witty. Generally speaking, the imperfection in everything human is that its aspirations are achieved only by way of their opposites. I shall not discuss the variety of formations, which can give a psychologist plenty to do. The melancholy had the best sense of the comic. The most opulent, often the best sense of the rustic. The dissolute, often the best sense of the moral. The doubter, often the best sense of the religious. But merely call to mind that it is through sin that one gains a first glimpse of salvation. That's a good note to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I like that line. We have freedom of thought and we demand freedom of speech. It's
Yeah.
really good.
No fish.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, I mean, I can only read so much Kierkegaard at any one
Mm,
time
mm,
because he in his writing, to my mind, he has so many twists and turns and flips and flops and that after a while of reading Kierkegaard, I'm just giddy and dizzy, and I just have to put him aside
mm.
until some future inspired moment.
It's difficult to concentrate on him.
Yeah.
It is difficult because he's doing the twists and the turns. It might be a little bit easier when you're reading it directly, but I think, I've got a thing with Joyce. I think a lot of what Joyce is trying to do in his writing is he's trying to get us to face certain facts about language and grammar. And he uses all these different styles to show us how our mind is seduced by language along certain paths. And then he'll change the path. And Kierkegaard is kind of doing the same, but he tends to do it a little bit quicker,
Yeah.
to my way of thinking.
And he used a lot of pseudonyms when he was writing, kind of not under his own name. And he was believed in God, and his father, when he was out on the mountains, cursed God, and he told Kierkegaard about this, and this kind of followed Kierkegaard through his whole life.
Yeah.
This idea that his father cursed God, and he kind of three levels that he talked about: aesthetic, ethical, and religious, and that you move from one to the other. The religious was the highest one. And he goes through them, I think, in a lot of his writing. He's a prolific writer. He's another book, Fear and Trembling, and Either Or I think is the big one. And but he influenced all the people that came after him, like Nietzsche was interested in, and Camus, and a lot of them, yeah, they all kind of related back to Kierkegaard. Kind of the big thing was Kierkegaard's subjectivity was more authentic than objectivity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What language did he write in English?
No, I think he was Danish, or I presume. I think
Was
I'm
Danish.
not sure, Joe, but I think he wrote in Danish, yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think so.
Nations. It just strikes me, Duncan, as you read, like it's terribly modern for
Yeah.
someone born in 1813, died 1855. I had to look on Google. Like by 1855, he was gone. And
Mhm.
He sounds more like someone from 1955
Yeah.
or even later. It's quite remarkable.
And the
Yeah.
other thing modern about him was he raged against the church, which was the
Yeah.
Protestant church in Denmark. The set church kind of, he raged against that and said that it wasn't Christian at all. It was
Yeah.
the individual that mattered, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, his first book, interestingly enough, goes very deeply into Socrates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very deeply. As a matter of fact, it was his, I believe, his PhD paper that he gave in public, and just stunned them.
Mm.
He went
Yeah.
to, I believe, he went to Germany and probably gave it in German. He
Yeah.
was, although I think he did write in Danish. I think he was very knowledgeable on German, and I believe his Greek was impeccable, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But don't quote me on that one.
Okay. Mm.
But he's like I say, he's lots of fun as long as you don't. For me, he's lots of fun as long as I don't take him in too intensive a dose at any one time.
But it was actually really nice listening to that. You're reading it, yeah.
It
That
was.
was lovely.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
could see what you meant about taking it in small doses could be the way to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've no knowledge of him at all. I'm learning from this, so I might take up that advice, Duncan. Just have it there.
Me
Get it.
too, Joe. I have his name down here.
Yeah, I would
He's
get,
going on my list.
yeah, I would
Joyce
get a little bit
name
about him.
checked him.
Hmm?
Pardon?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Joyce name checked him in Finnegan's Wake.
Mm.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure that Joyce was well aware of Kierkegaard.
Yeah.
But Kierkegaard, I mean, if you look at his bibliography, the man's production rate was prodigious. I mean, it's shocking how much he wrote, but he was a dedicated writer and thinker, and he at one point he did have a fiancée, but he decided that he was so into writing that it would be doing everybody a disfavor, including her, to get married.
Is it?
And so he lived by himself. I believe he had a modest fortune from his father. And so he had no need to make it. He never had any need to make money. Tom, you can probably tell me more about this than I can say, but I don't think he ever had to make money. His habits were very simple. He had a little house, and he spent most of his time at home writing, except that every day he would go out and would walk
Yeah, he used to walk
all
around.
over the
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
So anyway, if I've persuaded a few of you to take a little look at Soren, that's good.
Excellent. He has a couple of fans.
Mm-hmm. So, Joan, do you have something today to
Well,
share?
I'm not prepared. I could read a poem or something like that.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
that's of any.
Yeah.
Sure.
But can you make me next? Because I got to go in the other room to get the book.
That'll be fine. Tom is next in line, and so Tom can.
Okay.
do what he's gonna do.
I'm going to read a poem by Robert Penn Warren, the American poet and writer.
Mhm.
It's called Tell Me a Story. Long ago in Kentucky, I, a boy, stood by a dirt road in the first dark and heard the great geese hoot northward. I could not see them, there being no moon, and the stars sparse. I heard them. I did not know what was happening in my heart. It was the season before the elderberry blooms. Therefore, they were going north. The sound was passing northward. Tell me a story. In this century and moment of mania, tell me a story. Make it a story of great distances and starlight. The name of the story will be time, but you must not pronounce its name. Tell me a story of deep delight. Yeah, so that's Robert Penwarren. First time I heard that poem was Ted Hughes reading it. In himself and Seamus Heaney were giving poetry readings, and Ted Hughes read that poem, and it kind of stuck in my mind. And then I was looking up Robert Penwarren, and I came across a novel that he wrote, All the King's Men.
Yes.
And I had heard of Huey Long, who was the governor of Louisiana in the 30s, and this is based on his life story. But I read it then, yeah, there's a couple of years ago, and I liked it kind of. It was a kind of good novel. And then I saw it had won the Pulitzer Prize. And even later still, that was in 1946. And then in 1949, they made a film of it, and it won the Oscar for Best Film. So all these kind of connections strayed from that poem into Robert Penwarren. And I think he won more kind of prizes for his poetry and his novel, yeah. Right. But I just like that poem. It's the kind of the space or something that it gives you, and you can see the boy there. He was born in Kentucky himself, and you can see him there, like watching the geese and the kind of thing, and the way we all watch birds in flight, and it kind of gives us a kind of a lift or a kind of a sentiment towards kind of things, the vastness of and the vulnerability of birds in flight, I think sometimes too. But yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I went out last week. A friend of mine who has a boat took my girlfriend and I out on his boat out on Lake Buchanan. And curiously enough, there was a flock of Canadian geese on the lake.
Yeah.
I would also make the comment that actually All the King's Men is a very relevant book to the current moment in American history, because what Huey Long did in Louisiana, Donald Trump is doing in America.
Yeah.
He was a populist. He was particularly a favorite of uneducated people. And he could whip up the crowds, and they loved it. But he was an appalling governor. Of course,
he was assassinated then.
He made a bad end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was quite a guy as a boy.
Yeah.
So, Joe, you stood up to go get something.
Oh, I did. Oh, I was about to drop it on the floor. This is something interesting. I went to see, it was not a play, but it was, I don't know what you'd call it. A woman was reciting, and she has taken, her name is Alice Oswald, and she has here, her book is called Memorial, a version of Homer's Iliad. And what she has done is she has written little memorials of different characters that are in the Iliad and their background and who was lost. And I thought I would read a few of those.
Okay.
Uh, you can just pick one out, at random, actually. Here is Pandarus, son of Lycaon, had a wife at home in his high-roofed house in the foothills of Ida. He was captain of Zalia, and he and his men used to drink the black raw water from the river. He was a rich man, a master bowman, 11 war cars in his stable, brand new, beautifully made, with rugs and thoroughbred horses. He couldn't bear to risk them in the war. He went on foot to Troy with nothing but his bow, but that was no good to him. The arrows kept flying off at angles. If I ever get home, he said, and see my wife in my high-roofed house, may a stranger cut off my head if I don't. Smash this bow and throw it with my hands into the fire that has proved such a nothingness. But he climbed up, nevertheless, next to Aeneas. He charged at Diomedes, and a spear thrown by Diomedes pushed hard in by Athena. Hit him between the eyes its split second, splintered his teeth, cut through his tongue, broke off his jaw, and came out clean through the chin. Like an oak tree struck by lightning, throws up its arms and burns, terrifying for a man out walking, to smell that sulfur smell, and see the fields flickering ahead of him, lit up blue by the strangeness of God. Like the oak tree struck by lightning, throws up its arms and burns, terrifying for a man out walking, to smell that sulfur smell, and see the fields flickering ahead of him, lit up blue by the strangeness of God. That was the one of the warriors that talks about. He talks about others, some who were farmers and what they left behind and what what happened to them during the war, and I think it's really sets you thinking about. When you think of war, you think in terms of whole armies and not the individual people. And it was brilliantly acted out by a woman in a one-person show. And
So this is who is the woman?
her name is Alice Oswald, who wrote it. She's not the person I saw act it.
Okay.
And I wrote at the beginning of the book, bravo, bravo, bravo. I must have liked it. And there was in the newspaper, here, I can tell you the poet, Tara Flanagan, and she is a poet herself. She's in one, it tells more. I wish I had thought of this sooner, because I don't want to go through this whole thing looking for something that would be sort of succinct.
Yeah, well, it is.
I can't.
I am the guilty party that failed to remind everybody earlier.
Oh, yeah, things just got so busy for me the last couple of weeks. But I do recommend reading it, especially if you've read the Iliad and recognize some of the names.
Her writing is so descriptive.
Yeah.
And she captures that awful thing that I don't like about the Iliad is, every few lines there's an arrow going right through somewhere.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, well, that's not the nicest thing to think about before you go to bed at night.
Doris being killed by Diomedes, but it's the pitiless bronze that will chop off a man's arm at the shoulder in a single blow, all this kind of stuff, It's interwoven. It's all this beautiful poetry is bloodstained. Blood runs through it.
Well, that's an unfortunate aspect of war.
Yeah, the
Sure
casualties.
is.
But
You know,
here's just,
I saw a beautiful movie on Saturday. I think I mentioned to you before, I've joined the Austin Film Society again. Now, they not only show movies, they they teach people to make films and they sponsor films. They're very good at getting money to to fund movies that wouldn't be made any other way. And I saw a movie called The Damned,
Oh,
and it was a Civil War movie. It was about a small group of Union or Yankee soldiers that were sent west to prevent, again, they were going to prevent something. Apparently, there were also Confederate troops that were going out west as well. Most of the movie is just about this relatively small group of soldiers, like 10 or 12 soldiers, just doing daily life in an alien environment as the West. And it's completely boring. There's a lot of whiskey drinking, a lot of tobacco smoking, a lot of drills, and all this sort of stuff. And then, right in the middle of the movie, suddenly, in this boring thing, all hell breaks loose.
yeah,
And half the guys are killed.
yeah,
And I thought, I bet that's what war is really like.
yeah.
A whole lot of boredom and then very short spurts of absolute terror.
Yeah.
well, here's another 4 lines. Um, POTUS, a good friend of Hector. They used to have meals together. He panicked. He tried to run back to those times, but time itself finished him. And then it goes on. But that's the kind of thing that you would find in this book, plus some wonderful poetry.
So you're going to have to, I would like everyone, and Tom, you too, to put what you're reading. So we have a list. So here's my first reading, the Kierkegaard Either Or. So just when you get a chance, just type it in there. Because I would like to know, I would like to see in black and white the author's name,
What do we
Joan,
do? Down here,
Mhm.
in the chat. Mhm.
yeah. Oh, I can do this. All right, you can go on while I do it because
Okay.
I'm not very quick.
Any other comments or questions about what Joan read?
Orla, sit up. You're muted.
Oh, what happened?
Telling me to sit up, is it? You caught me on the hop. I thought we were going to be doing the trial,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
I
okay.
would,
Okay.
I would have spent a week getting poems. So there's no books to hand aside from. Is it my go to read?
Yes, if you have something to read, yes.
Marie,
Um,
Well, I
definitely.
just grabbed something. Just hold
Okay.
on till I de-steam my glasses.
Oh, that's what I did. Or
Fountain. It never rains, but it pours. Translate into heraldic Latin. Engrave onto the base of this public fountain, which stores up untold grudges, sculpted cups running over with angry outbursts, intense enough to wring acidic tears from stone. Not a good word can bring itself to utter, spitting out vinegary grievances, spilling forth the messy details in the language of the gutter. My God, how many sorrows there are to drown once you get started. Count your curses, it seems to say. Vows broken, illusions lost, ambitions thwarted. Let others gush. I am the one fountain, unbribable, with well-wishing coins that cannot be bought off. The truth must out. Mine is the no-nonsense voice, for which false hopes will never wash, in which you hear credence given to the fears you keep secreted in your brain's innermost folds, its locked cells, woefully chanting an unstoppable mantra, supposing, supposing, suppose. So I just picked that at random, and that's
Beautiful.
that Dennis O'Driscoll reality check.
Yeah, it's as good a way of any as picking a poem. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's up to the moment. It's what she brought with her.
Just in the eye line, I was there going, is there any Kierkegaard type philosophy I could try and
Yes.
read? But there isn't.
Yeah.
So you had a choice of that or more Louise Gluck. So I'll hold her off again. No, you see, what I find is wonderful is somebody says the week before, next week we're doing poems, and I spend the week at lunchtime going to poetry shops, bookshops,
Oh, yeah.
looking
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the poems.
Yeah, I think it's one of the great benefits of looking for something to read is all the stuff you come across and find,
Mhm.
and the search itself
Yeah.
is 50% more even of what you end
Yeah.
up reading, and it's
Yeah.
fabulous. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is.
Yeah, it is. It is. I used to work. I've worked in many libraries and many bookstores when I was younger, and that was what I really loved was the accidental finds.
Yeah.
Yeah, people ask me, how do you know what you want to read? I said, I just follow my nose.
Mm.
Yeah.
I should say, follow my eyes.
Well, yes, if you follow your nose, your eyes will go there too. You
Yeah, they come with it. Yeah,
it's attached.
yeah.
Well, I guess we are ready for you, Joe.
Okay, well, I actually was caught off guard as well, but I've often thought. I know we've only done it so many times, but I often thought I might do what I'm actually going to therefore do. And Tom will probably spot this straight away. So you know, I hope he won't jump in too much at the start because I'm going to leave out the name of the author. And my story begins in 1987. There's on the New Yorker and famous in London literary circles, a lady called Mary Hawthorne, who was a staffer in the New York magazine. She noticed a very disheveled old woman, dressed badly, eccentric, in the vestibule of the offices of the New Yorker magazine, staring at the floor. And that's the woman I'm going to talk about. I'm going to read a piece of something. And in the chat, I've put up a photograph. That's a photograph of this disheveled woman. If you enlarge it, you'll notice it's taken in New York sometime in the 1950s. She's far from disheveled.
Yeah, quite elegant, actually.
There she is.
Actually thought to be the inspiration for Holly Golightly, the Truman Capote, Breakfast at Tiffany's. That's taking slight liberties with established facts, but it's often said, and you can see why. She's Irish. Her father was the the first minister to the United States of America of the Irish Free State. We weren't allowed under the treaty to have ambassadorial relations. So we appointed ministers, and he left Dublin to take up office in Washington, and she was 17 years of age at the time, just finishing high school, and she completed her high school education in the States. And when the term of office expired, she stayed behind and lived all her life there and died there. She's the great granddaughter of this man, who you will not have heard of, Douglas Gerald, who was the great-great-grandfather of a classmate of mine in school, a boy called Alan Gerald. This is Douglas's life story. He was a writer in Punch magazine, and he was a very close friend of Thackeray and Charles Dickens. In fact, they carried his coffin. That's her great-great-great-great-grandfather.
That's pretty close.
And it's pretty close. So it might not surprise you to know that she got her first job writing on fashion in the I shouldn't pick things that require me to remember names because I can't remember them. The Harper's Bazaar magazine, and then became a staffer in the New York and in the New Yorker. What's it called? The New York magazine. The New Yorker. Yeah, that's what it's called.
Well, the New Yorker was the most prestigious of the New York literate.
She was a staff writer there.
Okay.
She was famous there for her approaches and so on. She lived out her life, and in the last 10 years of her life, she went insane. She became insane. She was also an alcoholic at the end, and was put. She was on the editorial committee of the New Yorker, but she had quit her job and so on. But she kept going back and trying to go back into her office, and she became a bag lady living on the streets, effectively. Used to call into the New Yorker magazine and go to the ladies' washroom, and where she tried to sleep and things. Eventually she was banned going beyond the vestibule. And I'm going to read one of her articles from the New Yorker magazine in 1976, called A Daydream. This is a daydream. I'm lying in the sand just below the dunes on the beach of East Hampton, New York, where I lived for several years. It is a warm, sunless day with a cool breeze blowing in from the ocean. My eyes are closed. I like the beach and the sand. There is a big Turkish towel between me and the sand, and I am quite alone. The cats and my dog, Bluebell, walked over here with me, but two of the cats dropped out of the walled rose garden a short distance back, and the four others are hiding in the long dune grass just above me. Bluebell is down in the water. She's a black Labrador retriever. She swims and rolls in the water and watches for a seagull to play with. But the gulls fly off, shrieking with outrage at the sight of her. I won't stay here much longer. In a few minutes, I'll get up and start for home. A 5-minute walk through dune and grass, and between trees and across the wide sloping lawn that leads to the big house where the walled rose garden is. I live at the foot of that lawn. I just lie here a few more minutes and then I'll go back. But I opened my eyes too suddenly. For no reason at all. The beach at East Hampton has vanished, along with Bluebell and the cats, all of them dead for years now. The Turkish towel is in reality, the nubbly white counterpane of the bed I am lying on. And the cool ocean breeze is being provided by the blessed air conditioner. It is 93 degrees outside. A terrible day in New York City. So much for my daydream of sand and sea and roses. The daydream was, after all, only a mild attack of homesickness. The reason it was a mild attack instead of a fierce one is that there are a number of places I'm homesick for. East Hampton is only one of them.
Oh, that's
Mm.
Yeah.
Understood.
And Mary Hawthorne became interested in the character of this person. She began to write about it, and her short stories were gathered together in a book called The Long-Winded Woman, which is what she was called herself. She died in 1993, and that book was published 10 years posthumously. It's one of 6 books that have been published, and there's more coming. The Rose Garden is another. This one I'm currently on, The Springs of Affection. And she's unique in that her column is like a Dubliner's, written in New York. And it's accidentally she has created New York in the 1950s, and it's a fantastic read. And this is her book on Dublin. When I was studying accountancy, I actually lived 10 doors from where she had lived, and only 5 or 6 years ago found out there's no plaque up or anything.
Right.
And the amazing thing is the boy I mentioned at the start, Alan is now the same age as me, and we celebrate this woman. We go to, I don't often go to pubs, but we go to a pub downtown. We celebrate her about twice a year. And he tells me stories because she was his aunt, and he remembers her coming to Dublin. And the amazing thing about her, when she lost her mind in the staffers in the New Yorker magazine, they paid for her hospital treatment. Giving education personally out of their own money. And Alan tells me that when she was told that she had written, she had no memory of ever having written anything. And they'd read it to her and it meant nothing to her.
Wow.
And so, She's also the aunt of a man called Roddy Doyle. Don't know if anyone has.
Mhm. Yes. Mhm. Contemporary novelist, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
school teacher, writer. The Commitments would have been a big
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
To be read with a Dublin accent, that book, you know. And so there you go. It shows you how literature runs in families. You
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
This is
So
her.
how old did she live to be?
Well, she lived to be 76 years of age.
Okay, and she lost her mind, so to speak, in her
In
60s.
81, I think it was, that kind of time. So born in 1917. So really the last 12 years of her life. But she was like the interesting thing is you'll notice dogs and cats there in that. And
Mhm.
if you look at read the Breakfast at Tiffany's, Truman Capote tells us one final twist about Holly Golightly. No, right name. I've been the name right. Holly Golightly is the character. Yeah, that he eventually goes away to Africa, to Brazil or somewhere. And the last thing she does is turn her cat loose in New York. Did Maeve Brennan, because that's her name, did Maeve Brennan, because she lived in cheap lodgings and everything at the end, did a point come where she had to turn her cat loose, which would break your heart.
Meaning she could no longer afford to feed them, sort of thing.
She could no longer afford the rent. She was going to live on the street.
Oh, okay, okay.
See?
Yeah.
And did Truman Capote put that in as a deliberate homage to her, you know?
Mm.
And the interesting thing is, if you go to the Museum of Literature Ireland, there's a montage of Irish writers. There are no names. And you see James Joyce, Yeats, George Bernard Shaw, and she's in there with them. And my friend Alan became quite emotional. He's never been in the Museum of Literature. When I told him she's up in her photograph has appeared up in the montage of Irish writers. A really hard thing to have to get done. You'd have to do it. But I think she's beside Brendan Behan.
Good man, yeah. To have a good conversation.
Yep.
That's my little story. It's a bit
Yeah.
long
That's lovely.
That's great. That's
Sad.
very, very interesting.
on my portion of time, but Maeve Brennan.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Orla caught it. Orla put it in the chat.
Yeah. So you see,
Yes, I'd heard of her, but
that's a famous photo. Again?
I'd heard of her, but I didn't know the backstory.
Oh,
But I knew about someone who was in the New Yorker, and I was very interested to hear that. You know, I was very interested to hear because of you. None of you would have that, but sometimes I have a fear that everything will go west. You know, that bad things might happen, and without a security blanket, what would happen? And what you're saying is that woman was in New York, her family were in Ireland, and they thought she was old enough to take care of herself, and the bad thing happened.
Yeah, well, maybe in 1941, Ireland was not a great place to be heading for. The European war going, even the trip across the Atlantic by sea wasn't exactly possibly available, and all that. But I mean, she married, and so but the marriage fell apart. Or she married one of the guys from the New Yorker magazine, but he was an alcoholic. He was 5 times divorced or 3 times divorced
Oh
already.
God.
It's her fault. They parted amicably. But if you were to get from the library The Springs of Affection, just to read the introduction to it, it's written by a former staffer in the New York that knew her, and it's really yeah, it really tells that, like, there's a lot of wishy stuff in there. You know, William Maxwell is his name, and like I could pick a little story out of that introduction as well if I wanted, to form another. But so there you go, Maeve Brennan.
It was a
Excellent.
very, I really
Interesting.
liked the piece that you read because it was so clear. It
She,
was simple and clear. It's like some really accomplished charcoal person who could just, with a few lines, paint a picture. And then the transition to where we're on the beach and suddenly we're lying in a hot apartment in
Hospital.
New York, it worked extremely well.
Yeah. Oh, she could get it. And you see, her father was editor of a newspaper in Dublin, a political newspaper, the anti-treaty newspaper. So her father had it, and her great grandfather had it, and her nephew has it. You see, there must be a writing gene.
Mm.
Uh-huh. So may I ask when the rest of her family returned to Ireland, how old was she when she decided to stay in
Well,
New
she
York?
was 17 on leaving, and I presume the term of office was about 5 years. So I'd say she was 21, 22. I
Okay.
think she was actually at university at that stage. Like I mean, she was like, uh, they were comfortable. Like it was rather smart parts of Dublin they were living in before,
Mhm.
before they left. Um, but it's, having gone to school in that part myself and lived there, it's amazing to hear her descriptions in this book. Uh, um, I know that by street. I mean, she mentions a convent. I served mass in that convent. So kind of thing. So but that's at a personal level. So
Can I just say, in Ireland, if you're on social welfare, you can get funding for your cats and dogs. They give money to feed cats and dogs. So, uh, if you're on the pension or whatever it is, you can get some sort of supplement that will feed your cats and dogs.
are you
Well,
serious?
that's good to
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
It's really important because many people are very attached to their pets.
Yes.
yeah, I didn't know that. I have a cat. Are they on seagulls? A tame seagull. Well, I have to-
Yes, you are entitled to, if you're on the pension, to a payment to feed your cat. I will look it up and I will get back to you next week.
oh, don't worry, I'll follow it up. Yeah,
So
I,
you might have 3 Rottweilers and a cat, and you would be entitled to a payment.
thank
Oh,
you.
that's so funny.
Okay, well, I better stop. That's it. I'll put something up on the.
That's great. That's
Oh, do
great.
yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Oh,
Okay.
Migo says he wants to move to Ireland.
He wants
Yeah.
right. He wants that extra security.
You can come and live with me. I'll claim for him.
They got a home for you, Migo.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, is someone just bursting with excitement to share a second piece?
1 second, I have to go my first one first, Donna.
Oh, that's a
Hello.
good idea. Excuse me.
It's a very good idea. Absolutely. Now, the first one isn't serious at all. I was cleaning up and I found a notebook where I used to write things down years ago. I wish I dated it. So, but I have a poem also by Yeats just to keep it standard up a small bit. Anyway, it's from P.G. Woodhouse and it's Heavy Weather. And it's the prize pig and she's sitting in her little pen and I actually wrote all of this out. Probably should be locked up. Anyway, this is inside her head. So the Empress of Balding stirred in her sleep and opened an eye. She thought she had heard the rustle of a cabbage leaf, and she was always ready for cabbage leaves, no matter how advanced the hour. Something came blowing across the straw, driven by the night breeze. It was not a cabbage leaf, only a sheet of paper with writing on it, but she ate it with no sense of disappointment. She was a philosopher and could take things as they came. Tomorrow was another day, and there would be cabbage leaves in the morning. The Empress turned on her side and closed her eyes with a contented little sigh. The moon beamed down upon her noble form. And then it says it looked like a silver medal because she was always in competition. And I laughed today when I found it. And obviously
Yeah.
laughed when I wrote that many, many moons ago. Now,
Okay, so let me clarify here. So that is an Anne Doyle original based upon
eh,
the P.G.
no,
Woodhouse
I
character.
actually wrote it out from P.G. Woodhouse.
Oh, yeah.
I see. Okay.
Oh no, because I actually Bloom got in there as well
Okay.
later on. It
Okay.
with relish in your organs of beast and fowl. So it's a bits of everything in there.
Okay.
But I
So
wish
it's
I had
an
actually
Anne
dated all
Doyle
of this.
special selection, we shall say.
Yes, I liked the philosophy. Anyway, the one I really like is The Song of Wandering Aengus by our friend W.B.
Okay.
I went out to the hazel wood because a fire was in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand, and hooked a berry to a thread. And when white moths were on the wing, and moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream, and caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire flame, but something rustled on the floor, and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossom in her hair, who called me by my name and ran and faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone, and kiss her lips and take her hands, and walk a mound long dappled grass, and pluck till time and times are done. The silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun.
Mm.
Just really
Lovely.
like that. It's a
Yeah.
lovely poem,
It's a
isn't
lovely
it?
poem. Yeah, it's a really lovely poem.
Really nice. That's my contribution.
Thank you very much. So let me see if my brain is functioning somewhat. So the little trout that was caught in the stream
Turned into
turned into a young
a
maiden.
beautiful, yes, who called him by his name. I have a note underneath it, and it's the 8th century was the Irish god Angus falls in love with a woman whom he sees in his dreams. His unrelenting love. And he was the god of love, youth, and inspiration.
Mhm.
Nice.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very nice. Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
No, Joe, how dare you?
Who is next? We have a little time left here, so we can do a little more sharing.
That's you, I think.
Yourself, Duncan.
Well, I am on the list next, but my question actually is there someone just raring to share something? Uh, if there is not, then I have uh, a piece from J.P. Donlevy.
Yeah, go ahead and
Yep.
read. Yeah.
Okay,
Perfect.
this is an obscure little book called The Unexpurgated Code, which is a book of etiquette written by Mr. Donlevy. Very difficult to find. And if you to get a hard bound copy like I have, even in tattered condition, is absurdly, ridiculously expensive. But I'm fortunate to have the university library. So I am going to just read a little piece called Upon Clothing and Appearances. The preservation of peace of mind should be foremost in providing for indoor or outdoor social intercourse. And there's nothing more devastating to one's optimism than being present in the right time in the wrong attire. But if it's sufficiently possessed in the right time with the wrong attire, let's see, but if sufficiently possessed of one's own personal significance, one can make a whole bunch of other people at a gathering collectively feel wrong, especially when they have the presumption to patronize you with overtures to make you feel right by approaching you at that magically convivial moment prior to heading into dinner. Quote, "Hey, I like your suit. Where are you going? To the races?" Presently, perhaps, but immediately beyond this point in time, you may find yourself wandering dumbfounded in search of your jaw. Impertinence, cheek, nerve, and sauce must, without preamble argument, be thoroughly stamped upon. And in order to highlight your true gent's disposition in meeting with such insolence, always instruct your servant to provide some small blitheness, such as a nosegay, when laying out your day's toggery. Polish your pate, too, with a soft cloth, and if you are inconvenienced by hair, this should be vigorously brushed and parted, which worn on the left during the day should be worn on the right during the evening. This always acts as a test as to how observant and ultimately fond your friends are of you, with the single exception of when it is worn by a cattle breeder. The colored bow tie, although a nifty neck item, should give cause to view the wearer with suspicion as a parvenu, a know-it-all, an extremely slippery character. And all throat fripperies are to be avoided by any seriously intentioned chap taking up the position of long-term gentleman. Flamboyancy, however, is not altogether to be forbidden, but ought nevertheless to be confined to one's hanky, a mere contour of which should be showing. Anyone adopting a recent fashion before it is sufficiently abandoned as old hat is not to be countenanced, nor are those who sport various tightnesses in the middle anatomy of our tailoring and take up wide-footed stances right in front of one's offending good breeding, as if it were the bee's knees instead of the ass's arse. So just a little flippancy from Mr. Donlevy.
Excellent.
And it's basically based upon the poor man, going to dinner at the Hamptons and being among the rich and the wealthy.
Yeah. Well, McDade's pub is still there. That JP used to go to the McDade's crowd, as they were called. I think all of them are dead, but the pub still soldiers on, and you could go in there and imagine him having that sort of conversation.
I had a book on etiquette, very, very old one, which unfortunately I had to give up most of my library when I moved.
Oh.
But it was a serious one. It didn't have those clever remarks in it, but it must have been something that was popular at one time too.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Emily Post, Amy Vanderbilt.
Mhm.
Those are two I can think of at the top of my head. Particularly in the 50s, 50s, 60s, Americans were extremely concerned about proper etiquette.
This was much older than that. This must have been back in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Kavanagh, the poet, once, he invited himself to Áras an Uachtaráin, the president's house. There was some reception on, and he had sandals and Narren jumper on him, and he got into an argument with a few people. But they wrote in the book not to be invited again.
Yeah.
I don't think Patrick Kavanagh had much time for etiquette.
My favorite story of that sort is the story concerning Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller,
Okay.
both American writers. Heller's known for Catch-22.
Yeah.
Vonnegut, for innumerable satirical science fiction, social criticism types of books. But anyway, they were popular and they were invited to a big party at the Hamptons.
Yeah.
And they were at the party and they got together and Vonnegut leaned over to Joseph Heller and said, "Well, Joseph, what do you think? You're looking at all these people. These people probably made more in 1 year than you have ever made in your entire life, even when you had your bestseller." And Heller looks at Vonnegut and he says, "Well, Kurt, I have one thing that they'll never have." Kurt Vonnegut said, "Oh, really? What's that, Joe?" And he said, "I know the meaning of enough."
Yeah.
Like that, that whole dress code etiquette stuff, it permeates business.
Mm.
And it's very closely linked to the worship of wealth.
Yeah.
The okaying of anything that's done by the wealthy type of thing, or the okaying of anything that makes you wealthy, that lies at a root of a lot of problems. And if you don't worship wealth, I find it very hard to fit into that crowd.
Mhm.
I've got several suits up there, stairs in the wardrobe, and I'm kind of beginning to realize they're never coming out of there again unless I go to
Right,
a
exactly.
you know. or even that, I'm lucky I've gone to funerals, but the sort of people I go to funerals of, they don't have suits.
And ties were another thing. Ties, whether you had a tie on or whether you had, yeah.
And the correct tie.
And the correct tie, yeah.
Mhm.
But this year at Ascot, at the glorious Ascot, as they call it, one of the enclosures, the men you had to have socks on you going into it. And a few of the younger men turned up with just the shoes and no socks.
Yeah.
And they had a shop around the corner where you had to buy this. If you wanted to buy it to get into it, you had to buy the socks. Yeah, and they're stopping them going in. That was this only 3 weeks ago, yeah. Glorious Ascot. Or Royal Ascot, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was hats. I thought that with women.
Well, they have to wear the hats in certain enclosures too. And the funny thing was the sun was beaming down, and the sweat pouring off them, and their hats and their ties and waistcoats.
And the fashion for the young people now is these shoes and short pants.
And their feet burning in the socks, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, believe it or not, there was a period in my life where I wore three-piece suits, tailored three-piece suits,
Yeah.
tailored dress shirts,
Yeah.
and to buy a tie was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I swear my Japanese wife and I would probably go out shopping for the next tie at least 15 times before she decided. She would look at a tie, she would look at me, and finally, after all these 15 visits, she would say, "Yeah, this will be okay." And we would buy the tie. And the reason why, I was still the same old schlub I've always been. I've never been a fashion plate, but I was in Japan and I was I was teaching trading company hotshots, and so I had to be dressed accordingly. And like Joe, for years after I returned to the States, I had a closet with 5 or 6 of these suits and shirts and ties. I think I'm down to my last tie.
Yeah.
And they've basically hung in the closet for the last 40 years. With occasionally, I did have one suit that I could get away with going to a funeral in. So it served a little extra duty for that.
And yeah, I've got a rack. I've got several racks of ties. They've been hanging there since the 1980s.
Yeah.
But we did a high school 60 years out of high school reunion, and it's all it was a bit beyond
That's
themselves.
great.
And the instructions came around, kind of this is dress code came.
Mm-hmm.
They said
Yeah.
no jeans and casual business. Now I don't know what casual business is. Like that's like saying kind of wet dryness. It's a contradiction. So I kind of I gave that guy a phone call. I says, I don't have any shoes. And I said I can't walk because of my feet. I wear trainers. I won't be able to go. I have the shoes, but I can't wear them. So am I going to be turned away? And he said, no, listen, I tell you, I won't mention the name because we're recording, but it's so-and-so, And we have one guy out of our ear who's a street musician, and he wears the bandana, It's the bandana they're trying to not, come in and that sort of thing. That was targeted at the one, but they were still a bit kind of, these are guys you share desks with. Standing at a door, you can't get in because you're not sufficiently.
Oh my God.
Just tying in, we mentioned Roddy Doyle earlier and Suits, but in one of his novels, I don't know whether it's The Snapper or The Commitments, there's a scene where 3 of the guys are sitting in a pub and the 4th guy comes in and he's wearing a suit and they're all looking at him, and said, where have you been? And he said, I went for an interview. And they said, you went for an interview? And he said, yeah. He said, but it wasn't a real interview. It was only a trial interview. And they said, okay. But he said, the good thing was that they told me that if it had been a real interview, I'd have got the job,
There's jokes around that thing. It's sort of a north side, south side.
Yeah.
Split in Dublin.
The other joke, you just mentioned that joke, but there's an old joke. The jokes used to be the south side and the north side. One of them was, what would you call a north sider in a suit? And the answer was the accused.
Accused, yeah. That's in cartoon.
Yeah, you wear a suit to impress the jury.
Okay, so help me next time as we get to the week before the first Monday. Help me remember to remind everybody.
Okay.
That the next first Monday is coming up. But I think we did really well despite the late notice, and at least I had a very good time. And
Excellent.
we'll get back to the trial and see where what happens to Joseph K. next.
Oh, I saw the movie. You can get the movie on television with Tony Perkins.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.